Well, Vern, it's good to see you could make it today for the Scotch review. And of course, Sparky. Oh, Sparky, you're already into the Scotch. You're supposed to be waiting for the review. So today we're going to be reviewing the Lagavulin 16. So we're looking at the Outer Hebrides here and the island of Islay. And as you can see there, we're going to go to the south part of the island, to the Kildown area, which is Port Ellen. And to the east of that is Lagavulin. And Lagavulin is situated between Laphroaig and Ardbeg. Those are the three most famous distilleries on Islay. So we're going to talk a little bit about the distillery, the history. It starts off with John Johnston, who built the Lagavulin distillery back in 1816 on the south Kildown coast of Islay. And that was first legal distilling on that site. But if we go back to 1742, according to records, there was illegal distilling on that site. And there was a second distillery, the Ardmore Distillery, on that same site, but it was closed, and Johnston ended up purchasing it and reopening it in 1825. So they had two distilleries that were producing on that site. But in 1835, Johnston decides to close the Ardmore, and he basically sent all that production to the Lagavulin Distillery. In 1836, Johnston died, and Alexander Graham, a Glasgow spirit merchant, purchased Lagavulin. And in 1862, John Mackie buys the distillery off his partner Alexander Graham. And in 1878, Peter Mackie, who was the son of a successful farm and grain merchant, Alexander Mackie, and of course the nephew and new employee of John Mackie, he was sent to Lagavulin to learn the secrets of distilling. And the Mackies formed the famous White Horse brand after the company Mackie and Company was formed in 1890. And of course Peter was made a partner. This issue happened in 1908. He was the agent for Laphroaig. I'd been the agent for quite a few years. And basically, he was dealing with Alexander Johnston, and when the distillery was passed on to Alex Johnston's sisters and nephew, they decided they weren't happy with the deal or the money they were receiving from Peter Mackie. And there were other issues as well. So Peter Mackie decided to cut off their water supply to the distillery. And it went to court, and after the ensuing loss in the courts, Peter Mackie decided, you know what, I'm going to build my own distillery. So he built this small distillery called the Malt Mill. And he copied the shapes of the stills as close as he could. Used a lot of the same equipment. He poached most of the staff from Laphroaig, and he used peat as his fuel. So no matter how much he tried to copy, and no matter how hard he tried to duplicate the process of distilling, it was never really successful at copying the taste of the whiskey. And of course, that was probably one of the few of Peter Mackie's failures, because he was hugely successful with the White Horse brand, and of course the heart of it being Lagavulin. And he was also known for his solid contribution to the whiskey industry, the standards, raising the standards in the Scotch whiskey business, the aging process, and to what it is today. So eventually he became Sir Peter Mackie, and after his son was killed in World War I, he decided to sell his business. And he was in negotiations with John Dewar and Sons, but they couldn't seem to strike a deal. And unfortunately, Mackie died in 1924 before his distillery was sold. And it went public a year later, and it became part of the huge conglomerate DCL, which eventually, of course, that was 1927, and eventually DCL, of course, became Diageo, which owns Lagavulin. So that's the history I'm going to tell you about. We'll talk about Peter Mackie another time. What is in the distillery? Basically, it's mash tun is a loaded type. We know it's a heavily peated whiskey, probably in the 40 ppms. The new made strength is 68 to 69%. The spirit still is 11,500 liters, and there is 4 stills. The wash still is 10,500 liters, and the washbacks are wood. There's 10 of them. And the water source is from Lotion Sholem, which is fairly close to this distillery. And that's it. That's the business. So let's now get into the review. Lagavulin. So this whiskey here was one of the first whiskeys I got introduced to that was, at that time, I call it heavily peated. My son bought me a bottle many years ago. I've forgotten how long ago it was, but it was many years ago. And he does not drink, by the way. He's a diabetic, but he's a researcher, and he got it right. So when I first drank this, I think it was a challenge. I was curious about it. There was something I was attracted to, but it was a challenge. And it took me till recently to figure out what that was. I was a commercial fisherman. I spent a good chunk of my life on the ocean. I was born next to the ocean on the opposite coast, Prince Edward Island, and I'm living here on the opposite side, the Pacific, on Vancouver Island, next to the ocean. As a fisherman, I spent a good chunk of my time out at sea. You know, I'd be out for 10, 12 days at a time, come in to deliver, back out. I think had a huge influence on the way my nose works, and certainly my tastes. When you're at sea, you smell the ocean, you smell kelp, you smell salt, you smell bright, you have medicinal notes, you have the smell of your wheelhouse, the smell of fish, the smell of iodine, etc., etc. So when we review whiskey, we do it with memories of notes that we smell through the years, and memories of notes, taste notes, and that's basically, I think, my connection with this whiskey. So, anyways, let's pour a dram and let's do our review. I was actually up skiing today, and now I'm reviewing. So I have an old bottle that still has the flag on it, and I'm hoping on maybe getting a shootout between the two bottles, the newer bottle and the old bottle. So, but I always keep a couple of these around because it's one of my favorites. So, anyways, the nose. I love the nose of a Lagavulin. This is a 43% whiskey, and it's got a very good nose. I'm smelling, the peat is a medicinal smell. It's got the kelp, it's got the iodine. I can almost hear the seagulls. There's sweetness. There's sweetness blended in with that kelp. Dried figs. Little tangerine notes, maybe marmalade, maybe a little lemon. And even some cherries. There's some interesting stuff going on here. Let's pull it away for a while. Get some air, some oxygen in my nose here, and see what happens when I go back here. So the peat dominates, but it's not It's not overpowering. It allows the whatever the casks are that they're curing it in, it does have good cask influence, because that's where you're getting these sweeter notes. A little bit of vanilla, and back to the dried fruit. We're going to stay with the dried figs, the dried dates, but they're spicy. Now we're getting some black pepper. You can smell the black pepper. I use a lot of black pepper. Okay, let's give the palate a shot. This is friendly peat. It's strong, but not. It's easy to engage with. I'm getting, again, those marmalade, the marmalade and the, I would say even maybe some jam notes in there, not just marmalade, but maybe plum jam. But it's layered just underneath the peat, which is very much a peat with kelp and iodine, and the salt and the brine is there as well. I would say the marmalade is quite strong toward the finish here, so let's go for the finish. We start with a very oily mouthfeel. That's something I did not mention. For 43%, this definitely is a full body whiskey. And it's still pretty much as I described the palate. It's all there. There's nothing different going on, but it's a good medium to long finish for a 43% whiskey. I think this probably has the longest finish of any of the 43% whiskeys that I drink. What can I say about this whiskey? It gets a lot of reviews. There's a little bit of critical reviewing going on this whiskey, that they should raise the percentage. I don't know why. The distillery knows how it works. They presented this to us as a 43. It might not work as a 48 or a 50 or a cask strength. There is cask strength whiskeys out there that Lagavulin makes. I have some. I've got an 8-year-old that's, you know, I think it's around 50, 48, 50. I've got an 11. I forget, it's close to cask strength. Same with the 12. These whiskeys are different than this Lagavulin 16. I like the other whiskeys, but this has always been my go-to. And I'll keep buying this. I don't know how many of the 11 and 12s I'm going to be buying. They're harder to get. Same with this whiskey, it's not always easy to get. But they're just whiskeys, I don't drink them as much as this one here. I mean, this is a whiskey I can sit down with folks and it's not going to knock them off their seat. And I think overall, this is probably one of the best whiskeys to present to people that are new at peated whiskeys. I think it's an easy engagement for them. I think it's easier for them to understand peat when they drink a Lagavulin 16, because it is a smooth, very smooth peated whiskey. Overall, I don't give this my highest score, even though it's one of my favorite whiskeys. And then again, the highest score whiskeys I got, I don't drink them all the time, so it can be very confusing in trying to explain that one. But I think there's some whiskeys that can be 43%. I think there can be some actually that is the design of the whiskey. It does best at 43%. And I think Lagavulin distillers are very knowledgeable. They have all this knowledge passed on from generation to generation of master distiller. And I think they know how the whiskey works. I think they know a lot more than we do. We think we know a lot more than they do sometimes, but we drink the whiskey. We don't distill it. We don't work there day after day and understand the failures and the successes. And I think that I respect this company and the way that, even though Diageo owns it today, I think, good, Diageo hasn't changed this radically. Oh, we're going to find out if they have, because I have an old bottle of Lagavulin, a very old bottle, and we're going to compare the two, and we're going to find out how much the whiskey's changed, because I haven't noticed it that much. But I'm going to put the two whiskeys together, and we're going to find out. An old whiskey probably 20 years ago to a whiskey here that is not more than maybe a couple of years old, a year old. So 87 is my score. Thanks for joining me. So drink wisely, don't drink and drive, and cheers to the next time.